The American experience in Vietnam, and particularly my own, had been like a B-52 strike from 60,000 feet up. Oh, we'd done a lot of damage. But very seldom did you have to gaze upon the consequences of that damage. That last day was like being in a B-52 strike right on the deck. You saw what our actions had wrought, and the horror and the shame was almost more than you could bear.
The Soviet Union proclaimed itself confident. It believed it was a superpower equal to America and boasted history was on its side. This rosy view ignored one problem: the treatment of Soviet dissidents like the writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn threatened to derail Detente.
Mr. Kendall.
American passions flared over restrictions on the emigration of Soviet Jews.
The questions of Jewish emigration from the Soviet Union and of human rights were a very strong irritant. These issues were raised regularly by the US Congress and by demonstrations organized by pro-Israeli activists, and sometimes by hooligans.
There was at the outset, of course, a genuine backlash in the Congress of the United States against the policy of détente, not in the first instance from where one might expect it, from the right-wing pews of the Republican Party. It came instead from the traditionally right-wing Democrats, the hard-line, sort of cold warrior Democrats like Scoop Jackson.
When we have something we feel strongly about, and in this case it is civil liberties and freedom and what this nation was founded upon, that we should do something to implement international law, and it is international law now, the right to leave a country freely and return freely, that we should put that issue of principle on the table, knowing that the Russians are not going to agree to it.
The debate about détente took a very curious form, because some liberals seem to take the view that maybe tension wasn't all that bad. And they suddenly developed theories of the need to intervene in human rights procedures that we never heard before, and that was strenuously rejected before.
In the Soviet Union, where memorials kept alive the remembrance of a terrible war, détente had few enemies. Soviet leaders hoped to guarantee their country's status and security with a treaty to be signed in Helsinki, which would recognize the post-war division of Europe. But this treaty had a stumbling block: human rights.
The members of the Politburo read the full text. They had no objections when they read the first and second articles. When they got to the third, humanitarian article, their hair stood on end. Suslov said it was a complete betrayal of communist ideology. Gromyko then came up with the following argument. The main thing about the Helsinki Treaty is the recognition of the borders. That's what we shed our blood for in the great patriotic war. All 35 signatory states are now saying these are the borders of Europe. As for human rights, Gromyko said, well, who's the master of this house? We are the masters of this house, and each time it will be up to us to decide how to act. Who can force us?
After overcoming the doubts of his colleagues, Brezhnev arrived in Helsinki, keen to cut a figure among leaders from East and West.
Людям, принадлежавшим поколению, которое пережило ужасы Второй мировой войны, особенно отчетливо виден исторический смысл настоящего совещания. Право на мир должно быть обеспечено всем народам Европы.
Both sides believed they had the agreement they wanted.
The Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact nations did not recognize that the human rights provision was a time bomb. We, the United States, believed that if we could get the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact nations to respect human rights, that was worth whatever else was agreed to in the Helsinki Accords.
3, 2, engine sequence start. 1, 0, launch commit. We have a liftoff. All engines building up thrust.
Thanks to Detente, rockets could now point the way to coexistence rather than war.
Houston flight, Zug Москва. Корабль Союз готов к стыковке.
Apollo Houston, I got 2 messages for you. Moscow is go for docking. Houston is go for docking. It's up to you guys.
Soviet and American spacecraft made history, docking together 140 miles above the Earth.
Contact.
All right.
In space, cooperation was replacing years of Cold War confrontation.
Glad to see you.
When we went to the United States for training, we met the Americans. I remember one of them saying to me, "Since this international project, I have begun to sleep better at night. I'm no longer afraid of nuclear war, because we are working together."